Hi, in this video I'm going to show you how to add multiplayer support to your Snap Grid Flow dungeons. So start by cloning an existing Snap Grid Flow single player demo, and then we'll add multiplayer support on top of it. So this should create a bunch of files. Go ahead and save them and open up this level that we just cloned, and if you hit play, this would create a Snap Grid Flow dungeon with keylogs and all that stuff. And we'll add multiplayer support. So if we try to play this as a listen server with two different players, we see that the server, it builds on the server. However, the client doesn't build the dungeon. So we're going to fix that first. So we need two things. But if you go to settings and world settings, you would see that there is a certain game mode blueprint that's being used. So we want to copy that over because we're going to modify it and add multiplayer support to it. So hit this button and it'll take you to wherever this blueprint is saved. So we want to copy this, and we also want to copy the player controller, the custom player controller that we're using in this demo. And we want to copy this over to our folder, and make sure you choose copy here and not move. So you're going to copy here, and these are and then just let's rename this to mp underscore. We're also going to rename this to mp underscore. So let's open up the game mode blueprint, and over here we have the player controller that we are using. We want to use our custom player controller with the mp prefix. So select that and register that over here, compile, save. We now want to use this game mode in our existing scene. So go to settings, world settings, and use this mp version of the game mode. So now we can modify this. So what happens here is, in the begin play of the game mode, we are setting up level streaming. So basically this hooks on to the on initial chunks loaded event. This gets fired when the dungeon fully is built and the spawn room is loaded in. Then we set a flag called dungeon ready, and we'll look at what this flag does in a minute. Then we randomize the dungeon by choosing a random seed value, and then we go ahead and build the dungeon. There's a feature in Unreal Engine where we can wait till the level is fully loaded in, and then we start the game. So during that time, the camera will stay in spectator mode, and then it starts. So we control that by overriding a function called ready to start match. So you see that in this list here. And once you've overridden it, double click and open it. Now, as long as you return false in this node, it would stay in spectator node, and when your game is ready, you just pass in true. So we just pass in this variable, and we set this value to true only after the spawn room has been loaded in. So this is what this flag does. Then after that, we also have one more function that we override, which is called find player start, and we search for a player start actor, and then we go ahead and use that to spawn our player in. And the player start actor is placed inside the spawn room. So when the spawn room has fully loaded in, we want to use that as a start room, and this is how we make sure that the player is placed inside the spawn room when we start the game. So if you go back to the event graph, you see that there is a begin play event, and the game mode's begin play event will only fire on the client, on the server side. It will never fire on the client side. So this is the reason why you see that the client doesn't build a dungeon here, because it never gets fired. So we're going to fix that. And what we need here is so the way we fix this is by first building the dungeon on the server side, and as the clients log into the server, we need one more function to override here, post login. On post login function, we're going to override this function, And whenever clients log in, we want to save these clients on an array. So pending client, and we're going to change this to player controller. Turn this into an array. So while we're still building the dungeon, and if any client logs in, we just save them in this list. And when our dungeon is built, we're simply going to go through all the clients that are in this list. That is all the clients who've logged in, and we tell them to go ahead and build the dungeon in their client machines. So when that is done, we want to also save a value of the seed here. So promote to variable, we're going to call it dungeon seed. Now we're saving a copy of the dungeon seed because we want to send this to the clients. And if we send the seed to the clients and they build a dungeon using the same seed, then they're guaranteed to have the same dungeon generated in all the clients as well. So now that this is done, we're going to have a tick function, event tick. And here, if we have already built a dungeon, then we go through all of the pending clients, the clients who have not yet built the dungeon. And we can go for each. And this is your player controller. We tell them to build the dungeon in the client. So for that, we're going to create a function in our player controller. So first, we're going to cast to the MP version of the player controller that we created. And here we're going to call a function that tells them to build the dungeon on the client side. And we pass in the seed that we saved here. So let's open up the player controller. And here we're going to create a function, custom event, build dungeon on, and we want this to be replicated, run on owning client, and it is also reliable. We don't want to miss this event. And here we simply go ahead and find actor of class, and we search for a dungeon actor, and we call build. So here we need a parameter called seed. Turn that into an integer, and then is valid. If you found a valid dungeon actor, then go ahead and config and set the seed. Set seed to this value. And finally, we want to build this dungeon. So this is going to build the dungeon on the client side of whoever owns this player controller on the client machine. So let's try and now if you go back to the event tick, we cast to it, and here we want to build it only on the client, so we make sure that has authority is set to root, because we were already building it on the server side, so we don't want to build it. So only if it's a client, we build it here, and go here and just call that function client, build dungeon on client. So next up, we want to I want to go back to the game mode over here. You want to go back to the game mode, and when we are, so we're looping through all of the pending clients, and then we go ahead and call, once a dungeon is built, we loop through all of the pending clients, we call the dungeon build on client function, and they build the dungeons on the client side. After that, we need to clear out this. So let's clear this out because we've processed them. And let's try this. Right, now this has built another dungeon on the client. It didn't build the same dungeon, so we need to see what's happening here. So yeah, we're not passing in the seed value, so let's fix that. We want to pass in the seed value here, so that let's make sure that the same dungeon is built everywhere. So let's try this out. Right, so we have the same client and the server, same dungeon as the client and the server. So this is the server. I can walk through the door, and on the client, if I try to walk in, I'm not able to walk in. So this is a, so we have another issue with the doors. So the door asset is not multiplayer ready. So we're going to go to the door blueprint, and we're going to make this work with multiplayer. So let's stop this, and it's giving an error. We're just going to make it this valid check here, and let's save this. Now we want to go to the door blueprint. So open up the modules, go to one of the modules, and here you'll find the connection. So this is what we're using for the doors. You have a bunch of door blueprints. So let's go to this door blueprint over here and double click open that. So we want to enable replication on this door. So replicate. So let's enable replication, replicate set to true, replicate movement also set to true. So what the theme engine does is, if you've set this to replicates, then this door would only be spawned on the server side and it will not be spawned on the client, because the engine would take care of spawning it on the client and it would be synchronized properly. So let's try this out. So if I go back to the server, oh man, now this still doesn't work. So we need to see what's happening here. So let's look at the door opening logic. So how do we open the door? We have, if you go to the event log, we have a function can open door. We want to first off run this. So can open door has a check where if there is a key, it would go and check whether the user has a key or not. I mean, if it's a locked door, it's going to check if there's a key. Otherwise, if it's not a locked door, then we just get the first player controller in the world, and that if it's a player playing it, then we do it. But this is not a very good way of doing this. So what we need to do here is we're going to check if there's a character standing in front of it. If so, we just open it. So cast to character. So if it's a character, we open it. Otherwise, we don't open it. So now let's try this out. See, now this works. All right, now we want to debug the key lock system. So to make our life easier, we're going to create a simple flow graph. So let's duplicate this and call it debug np graph. And here we're going to get rid of everything except for a few nodes. And we're going to create a very small dungeon so that it's easier for us to debug and make sure that our key locks work on multiplayer setup. So I am going to set the size of this to maybe 3, and the key lock is going to be on the main path. So if it's just 3 nodes, the first node in this path would be called main start, the last node would be called main goal, and all the nodes in between would be called main. So I want the key to be in the second node and the lock to be on the last node. So the goal node would be, lock path would be main goal, and the main path and the key path here would be main. So let's build this, and we want to bring this down to 3 1 1 1 and build this. So this is how it generates, and it's easier for, we just walk out from here and we see that there's a key here, we pick it up and see if it opens. It just makes our life easier for debugging this. Now let's see if it works with our module database. And I'm going to assign the module database here and build it, and it says it cannot build. The reason is it doesn't have enough space to build it. The end goal, the end room, for example, is 2 by 2, and the start room is 1 by 2. So we need more space. So I'm going to select the create grid and give it a 3 by 3 by 2. And if I build it, it can build something like this. So let's save this and assign this debug graph onto our dungeon. And just build it once and see it builds. All right, so now when I play this, I should see a key over here. Let me also go down here. I'm gonna pick up this key. You see that the key has disappeared, right? I have the key, but no other player can pick up the key now because it's gone. Now this is purely gameplay specific. This is something you might want in your game, or maybe you might not want this in your game. You might want the key to be there so all players can pick it up. So since I don't have the key, I'm not able to pass through it, right? But I can pass through it from here. So we are going to fix that. So let's start by going to the key. Start by opening a theme file and seeing where the key is. It's over here. And if I open this and go to the class settings, you see that it derives from BP GFT keybase blueprint, which is this one. So we're going to modify this. So what we do here is, once you begin overlap, once we touch this key, we are just going and adding the key to the player's inventory, and then we destroy ourselves by calling destroy actor. We don't want to destroy it, so let's start by disabling this destroy and see what happens. I'm gonna go and pick it up. I get 1 2 3. I get lots of keys. I don't want that. I want only 1 key. And the next time I add it on my inventory, I just check if the key is already there. If it's there, I don't want to add it again, right? So we're going to fix that. So let's go to the inventory. So if we go to the game mode here, you see that we have a first person character that we play with, and this is our default pawn class. So let's go over here and open that up, and you see that there's an inventory here. So this is a sample inventory. It really depends on how you design your inventory in your game, but this is a simple inventory, and I'll show you how to deal with this. You can do something similar in your implementation as well. So this is the grid flow GF inventory component. It's another blueprint component I created. Go here, search for it. GF inventory component, this one. So if you open it here and you see there's an add item function, this function is being called from here, from the base. If you look here, add item. So just double click brings you here. What it does is it goes ahead and adds this item into a slot. So we are simply going to make sure that the item doesn't already exist in the slots array here. So let's add a function item exists, and take in a GF inventory, take in an array of this item, flow graph item. So take in an input of and here we simply loop through each one of these and make sure it doesn't exist for each. And I go and break this and check if this is equal to what we are checking for. And if so, then we return true. Just add a parameter called exists. Again, compile, save. If found, then it exists. Otherwise, if you've completed the loop without finding one, so it doesn't exist. And yeah, we need to link this up. So we check this before adding it. Item exists. You know what, we can make this blueprint pure. So if I select this item exists, you can choose this as pure, because we're not modifying the state of this very function, so it could be pure. Then we don't need to pass in the execution pin here, and pass this over here, and then branch, and we add it only if it does exist. Now if I were to run this, I'm not picking it up. Let me see what's happening. Okay, we want to add it if it does not exist. So if it is false, only then we add it. Now let's try it out. So I pick it up, I get one key, but I'm not getting any more keys here. You see. Next up, I am going to go through the client, and before picking that up, I'm going to try to walk through. It doesn't work. But if I pick it up now, both the client and the server, we both have the keys. I can walk through it. Now there is another issue that you might face in the XAMPP on version 4.25, because I want to make the samples work with be backward compatible. But when you're in 4.27, you'll have a problem with the mobility of the object. So if I go to the theme editor, so if I go to the connection editor here and look at the door blueprint, you have to make sure that none of this is static. It has to be movable. So everything is movable here. The door is movable, but this is not movable. So you'll have some issues with placement of the object, because if anything is static, then Unreal might not will do some optimization internally, and it might not succeed in the request to move the door in a certain place, and it be stuck at 0,0. So you need to make sure that this is movable and save it, and do the same for all of the other ones as well. Now, if you go back to the game mode logic, there is another thing that we need to handle, and this is the way it's in the way we find the player start. So how do we find the player start? So this function is called whenever someone logs in, and the engine is trying to place this player when they start the game, right? So right now we search for all the player start actors, and then if you find one, we tell the engine, all right, go ahead and spawn the player in this location. Now this is all fine, but we'll have a problem if the spawn room has been streamed out, right? So your server is the player on your server has, let's say, moved far away from the spawn room, and then a client logs in, and this function gets called on the server, and we don't have the server spawn room in. So what we want to do in this function, what we want to do here is as soon as the spawn room is loaded, we want to save a reference of all the player starts that we find on the world, so that in this find player start function, we don't need to rely on get all actors. We'll be doing that over here instead. So get all actors of class, and then select player start, and we promote this to variable. Spawn room player start. It's got spawn points. And then inside of this function, we don't want to call this. Instead, we're going to take this one and use this and hook this up here. We don't need this anymore.